Welcome to Sunday services of the Unitarian Universalists of Clearwater. I am Margie Manning, Worship Associate for this morning. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Our congregational building is located on Tocobaga land, but today our congregation is here on Zoom as we honor the most vulnerable among us and keep our relationships strong within the constraints of our current situation. The order of service and the words for the hymns can be accessed from the e-octogram and printed out so you can participate in the chalice lighting in the hymns. The words are also available by clicking on the chat symbol at the bottom of your Zoom picture. The words will appear on the right side of your screen. This service is being recorded. It will be rebroadcast on YouTube. While this is virtual space, it is also holy space. At the request of all those who worked on today's service, we are asking that you refrain from making comments in the chat function while the service is going on, so that you can stay focused on the message and out of respect for our speakers. All are welcome here, where we are united by our covenant to create a beloved community and to treat each other with respect, kindness, and as equals, no matter our gender, race, sexual orientation, or economic status. All are welcome here, where we have no creeds. You may choose to worship one or many gods or deities, or none at all. Despite the stay-at-home order, we continue to hold church activities for both adults and children on Zoom. Read the e-octogram for the schedule and the meeting numbers. Right now, we're in a period of ministerial transition, and we have a different speaker every week presenting different theological viewpoints. Our speaker today is Reverend David Franks, our pastoral minister. You'll hear more about him in a few minutes. Now our prelude, An April Day, by Vicki Tucker Courtney. Our call to worship was written by Reverend Margaret Weiss of the First Unitarian Society of Ithaca. She writes, "The church is not a place, it is a people. The church is not only a steeple above the tree line, streets, and cars. It is a people proclaiming to the world that we are here for the work of healing and of justice. The church is not walls built stone upon stone, held together by mortar, but rather person linked with person, all ages and genders and abilities, a community built on the foundation of reason, faith, and love. The church is not just a set of doors open on Sunday morning, but the commitment day after day, moment after moment, of our hearts creaking open the doors of welcome to the possibility of new experience and radical welcome. The church is not simply a building, a steeple, a pew. The church is the gathering together of all the people and experience and fear and love and hope in our resilient hearts, gathering however we can to say to the world, welcome, come in, lay down your heartache, pick up hope and love. For the church is us, each and every one of us together, a beacon of hope to this world that it so sorely needs it. Come, let us worship together. As I light the chalice, please join me in the reading of the chalice lighting words written by Laura Thompson. Across the distance, the light from within me shines, sending love to all. Across the distance, your light is fuel that warms me and helps to keep my own light burning. Together, we keep the flame of community burning bright. And now our opening hymn, My Life Flows On in Endless Song, number 108 in the Gray Hymnal. Each Sunday, we share joys and sorrows with one another. If you have a joy or sorrow to share, please email the church office by Thursday to be included in the next Sunday's service. No one has sent any joys or sorrows that I am aware of for today, but let's honor all the joys and sorrows unspoken that we hold in our hearts. I'd like to offer a reading from Reverend John Behrens and Reverend Rebecca Parker, adapted from their book, A House for Hope. Hope rises. It rises from the heart of life, here and now, beating with joy and sorrow. Hope longs. It longs for good to be affirmed, for justice and love to prevail, for suffering to be alleviated, and for life to flourish in peace. Hope remembers. It remembers the dreams of those that have gone before and reaches for connection with them across the boundary of death. Hope acts. It acts to bless, to protest, and to repair. After a few moments of silence, we will sing Spirit of Life. Here's a headline that caught my eye this past week: 10 Tips for Staying Sane During the COVID-19 Crisis. It was written by Mary Smitch, a columnist for the Chicago Tribune, who talked about how she went from store to store looking for hand sanitizer, a commodity that's taken on more value than oil or gold. She was at a CVS, and a clerk went digging through a dozen boxes to try to find some, and the clerk finally found 2 small boxes at the bottom of a box. When that happened, Mary said she felt calmer, not because she had the hand sanitizer, but because the clerk, a complete stranger, had made the effort to help her. That led her to devise these 10 tips to alleviate anxiety, which I'll read borrowing from David Letterman's top 10 list. Number 10, think spring. There's more daylight, flowers are blooming, and we're reminded that we're never really in control of nature, but the sun will always return. Number 9, laugh. Mary suggested making up words to a familiar tune. She likes these words to Bob Dylan's Blowin' in the Wind. How many times can a girl wash her hands before she goes out of her mind? Number 8, keep perspective. This is not the worst crisis in the history of humanity, and any crisis, by revealing systemic shortcomings, can lead to improvements. Number 7, don't isolate yourself. Stay connected through your phone or your computer. Number 6, breathe. Exercise. Meditate. Take a walk. Get fresh air, even if it's just opening a window. Number 5, when you find yourself mad at someone you care about, ask yourself, is this just coronavirus anxiety talking? Number 4, be careful where you get your information. Double check news sources. Number 3, don't wallow in the news. Turn it off. Read a book. Listen to some music. Number 2, and I don't want to sound like you know who here, but get some sunlight. And the number 1 way to alleviate anxiety? Be generous. A little act of kindness, making an effort like the clerk in the CVS did for Mary, can make someone else feel better and can make you feel better too. Our congregation relies on all of us to be generous right now. There's information on our website, in the e-octagram, and in the chat box about how you can give. Now for the offertory.
junto al río, no nos moverán. Unidos en la lucha no nos moverán. Unidos en la lucha no nos moverán como un árbol firme junto al río. No nos moverán. United in the struggle, no nos moverán. United in the struggle, no nos moverán como un árbol firme junto al río. No nos moverán. Por nuestras hermanas no nos moverán. Por nuestras hermanas no nos moverán como un árbol firme junto al río. No nos moverán. Por nuestros hermanos no nos moverán. Por nuestros hermanos no nos moverán como un árbol firme junto al río. No nos moverán. Standing up for ethics, no nos moverán. Standing up for ethics, no nos moverán como un árbol firme junto al río. No nos moverán. Standing up for immigrants, no nos moverán. Standing up for immigrants, no nos moverán como un árbol firme junto al río. No nos moverán. Black and white together, no nos moverán. Black and white together, no nos moverán como un árbol firme junto al río. No nos moverán.
I'm Mike Meddy, and I've been a member of UUC for almost a decade. When it was announced in February that Reverend Franks was coming to UUC as a part-time pastoral minister, I requested a visit. I want to share that experience more widely with the congregation. Reverend Franks, whom I had not met before, joined me and my wife in our Tarpon Springs in early March for an hour. He quickly established a level of confidence and trust that I had not previously experienced with the ministry. Our first conversation was filled with interesting snippets, tendrils of thought that pursued later or whenever opportunity to think about and bumble about a bit. It was really gratifying to have an easy conversation with depth without feeling the need to erect any barriers. There was an ease and flow that comes with visiting an old friend. Yet here I was, seeking to come to terms with another round of terminal illness and how best to cope with it. I felt unprepared and unready, uncertain about even what to feel this time around. I was surprised by the level of detachment I had on the one hand and on the ordinariness of chaos in the surrounding environment. At the same as the month of March progressed, and as the pandemic seized the attention of the world, my vision focused on how best to manage the personal and the collective, the individual and the familiar. What changed most dramatically was the scope and scale of life outside the immediate. The easy, graceful death option was getting tougher. The second conversation was one-on-one by phone in late March. It was deeper and richer. It felt more pointed. It seemed to occupy some interstitial space that had not emerged and was finally finding an opening. I had regained, with Reverend Frank's help, more balance and a sense of forward movement. During the same time, he was following up and checking in by phone with my wife and giving pastoral support to her as we both traversed the latest in radiation treatment. Reverend Franks helped me refocus on the immediate, the present, the stuff that really seems to matter even when it wants to drift out of reach. As I look back at it now, as recent as it was, much of it appears inchoate, yet fundamental to the process of departing. Talking about a good death is feasible and realistic. Mostly what I would like to relate about Reverend Franks is that we engaged in a delightful conversation that wandered about and created connections rather than pose questions or search for answers. There was a lightness of spirit, of topic, of storyline that provided a framework for telling our stories. And I think that is so important for each of us to be able to share our stories and have them heard. It is with gratitude that I introduce Dr. David Franks.
Oh, Mike, that's very gracious of you. I think we can just stop right there if you like. But what Mike didn't tell you all is that when we were finishing our closing session together, first time we met, he stated, you know, I wasn't sure what to expect. And to which I replied, well, neither did I. and then he said, well, what? You know, no, that's a concern, he said. You know, you're supposed to be the expert. And so we kind of just laughed together at that point. And I said, no, Mike, you're the expert of your own story and where that story is taking you now. My name's David. I go by the pronouns he, him, and his. You know, we are all the experts of our own stories. In the time of coronavirus, a president that is, what can I say, indescribable? People who are so wanting of getting their hair cut that they are willing to protest shoulder to shoulder in many of our state capitals. And all of that, I'm rather reminded of the story of a young man who when attending a big party at a very wealthy Floridian's estate, what happened was this huge barbecue that was going on, and the host, this rather eccentric host, then called for the attention of everybody at the party. Shouted out, everybody, if I can have your attention. And everybody became silent. Then he said, listen, you see that pool over there? And everybody looked over, and they couldn't help but notice that pool because it was filled with alligators. From side to side, all the way in the depths of that pool were alligators. And he said above the crowd, he said, "Hey, listen, everyone, if anybody is willing to jump into that pool and makes it to the other side, I'll give you one of three wishes. You can either have $10 million, or I'll give you a 1,000-acre ranch with a beautiful mansion on it, or I'll give you my daughter's hand in marriage." Well, no sooner had he said that than splash! There's a big splash in the pool, and all of a sudden there's just boiling turmoil happening in the pool, and alligator tails flying up in the air, and eventually, finally, a young man climbs out on the other side of the pool. I mean, everybody, of course, is totally astonished because they didn't think there would be such an outcome. Young man is just, his clothes are just torn to shreds. But that eccentric, wealthy Floridian, the owner of this beautiful estate, says, "Oh my gosh, but you know what? I'm a man of my word. You can either have the $10 million, or you can have the estate with 1,000 acres and a beautiful mansion on it, or you can have my daughter's hand in marriage." At which point the young man said, "Sir, I do not want any of those things. I want the guy who pushed me in the pool." You know, I think there are times, when we do not go voluntarily into the pool. We do not go voluntarily into the dark night, into moments, into days, into weeks, not of our own choosing, but ones in which we find ourselves. And they can feel as threatening as a pool filled with alligators, a life-threatening diagnosis, a job no longer there to wake up to go to in the morning, a cane that is replaced with a wheelchair, loneliness that was dispelled by the pet who shared our home and is now gone too soon. And we wonder, how are we to get to the other side? And in such times, how are we to welcome tomorrow? I believe we first begin by going to that place where we find our safety, a safe space. For the past few weeks, that has meant staying in place in our homes. And it has also meant being diligent in keeping our home safe places to be. But there's also another kind of safe space that we can enter. It is the space that we create for each other. I have never heard it more poignantly described of such a space than of a man who taught drama in a high school in Mountain View, California, which is a city that is not far from where I used to live. Now, the majority of the students in this man's class were Latino. And in the beginning, it was hard to get kids to actually sign up to be in his class. But on the first day of class, he told his students that when they are asked to be on stage, they must keep only one thing in mind. They must remember that the stage is a safe place. When on stage, no one would be allowed to judge or to criticize them. Now, that teacher recalls that those kids in his class came alive in that semester as that semester progressed. They sang, they acted, they improvised. And when they got around to it, that they had become so successful with being on that stage that when that class was over and the class was going to be offered again, word got out. Instead of 20 students being in that class like there was that semester, there were over 40 kids who were waiting to be able to be registered for that class. Well, the teacher asked the students, why are you, because most of all of them, if not all of them, belong to gangs. And the teacher asked, why are you in gangs? What is there about a gang that makes you want to be a member? And the answer came like that of a chorus singing the same melody line. In the gang, we are somebody. In the gang, we have fun. In the gang, it is us, it is we who get to hassle the police. In the gang, we get respect. Well, the teacher said, there are so many of you who want to be in this class. I can't take all of you into the class. So here's what I want each one of you to do. I want you to write an essay for me as to why you want to be in the class. And without objection, those 40 students took out pen and paper and they began to write. And when they had finished, they turned their essays into the teacher, who took them home to read and to decide which 25 of the 40 students would be admitted into the class. Well, he says that as he began to read the essays, they all began with a familiar plea. Every single student wrote in their essay, some of them only writing in big letters across the page, I want out of the gang. Please help me get out of the gang. Well, the teacher took the essays and he met with the school counselors. And between the counselors and the teacher, they decided upon which of the students were most at risk for violence, most at risk of not being able to make it through high school. And those were the students who were admitted into the class. Now ask what he thought was the thing that caused these teenagers to want to be in that class. He replied, the stage had become known as a safe space. They wanted a safe place to be. Now what that teacher created for those students, I think, is something of what this congregation is and what it continues to be called to be, which is to create a space for each other in which no one will be judged, no one criticized, only valued. Where we can sing, where we can dance, and mainly where we can also improvise. You know, and in this way, it is by all definition a sanctuary, a place of safety. And that is what makes it a place that is sacred. It's not unlike sanctuary cities today, where immigrants are safe because the police decline to function as ICE. It is a place that makes possible a tomorrow for them and for us. Makes it possible for us to welcome that tomorrow. You know, when we do create such a place, such a sacred space for each other, tomorrow becomes more welcoming. It offers promise rather than despair or cynicism. And the first step in waking up to a tomorrow that welcomes us is for us, actually, to be open to it. And that is a calling that comes to families, to those without family, to communities, to governments, and yes, to congregations. There are no welcoming tomorrows without waking into them with anticipation, with an openness to see just what tomorrow may bring. You know, I'm reminded that when I was a kid, my buddies and I would ride our bicycles to new housing tracts that were being built. And we would clamber down into the storm drains with our flashlights. The storm drains always began wide, where we entered them, and then as we would walk, we could walk fully upright. But as our subterranean ventures always took us, the walls and the ceilings of those storm drains would become increasingly narrow until we would have to crawl on our hands and knees. Eventually, we wouldn't be able to go any further. Each of us, our faces blocked by the posterior of the kid ahead of us. And that is when we would all turn off our flashlights on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. And there we would be, in total darkness and quiet. And after a very few minutes, we would find ourselves attempting to quell the rising panic that grows inside of one when one is in the dark down of a narrow confines of a storm drain. And it was all part of the quest, you see. The learning of how little movement there is when one begins from openness and moves towards narrowness. And inevitably, there would always be that one kid who would, at that moment of greatest control, equaled with abandonment to the dark, would pass gas. And as you can imagine, it is not easy when one is on one's hands and knees in a contracted, crowded storm drain to reverse direction quickly. Too quickly, and one can become rather bruised and scraped and scratched. Now, it may be a stretch, I know, to carry the analogy much further. However, but let me permit to say that our lives can sometimes feel like being down in that storm drain. We start out in life open. Things are possible. We feel adventurous, with only the stars serving as a canopy to our potential. And then we enter a relationship open to the other person with whom we feel whole, maybe. We begin a new job open to the challenge. We have yet to discover what is really in that job description. But eventually, like most things, we start out with openness, but then we move into the narrow, more confining ideas, expectations about who we are or who we think we're supposed to become. Or the same with others in our lives, who we think what they should be or how they must become, until we cannot go forward anymore. We find ourselves without any kind of light to guide us. Sometimes something happens when we get out of that space, and we get out of that space as quickly as possible. We get a flash of insight or confirmation of a dream we held that propels us onto a different stage, onto a more welcoming stage. Or at other times, something tragic happens and life's assurances are peeled away, and we are forced into the open much more quickly so as to quell the panic that rises in us. But most often, I think we move into openness, into tomorrow more slowly, in order to lessen the possibilities for being bruised, for being scraped or scratched. You know, in the past few weeks, I very much appreciate the times I've been with your pastoral associates through our meetings in Zoom. We meet weekly. And I know I tell you nothing you don't already know when I say they are amazing, outstanding people you have amongst you. Their commitment and their wish to be available to all of you when you find yourself in one of those questioning, uncertain times that feels like being in that storm drain, that's something you can count on in them. You see, they not only know how to caringly listen, but to do it in a way that creates that safe stage on which to have our bruises, our scrapes, and our scratches gently attended to. I want to encourage you to afford yourself the opportunity to their ministry of pastoral care. You are fortunate to have them with you and amongst you. You know, it is with folks like them and our attentiveness, our openness with one another, without judgment, without criticism, that gives each one of us permission to move in tomorrow, to welcome it, and to let it welcome us. Think to yourself, ask yourself, if you would, What are some ways in the tomorrow to come that what I say, that what I do gives permission to help another to welcome their tomorrow, to help make it a safe place for them, just like that teacher did for those Latino students. You know, in this time of COVID-19, screwed up politics, people anxious about tomorrow, a world in grief, know that there is a safe shore out there, though we may not quite see it beyond the horizon from which we are sailing today. But it is there. It is the stage that we create for each other. I want to leave you with this thought from Jewish scripture, from the Talmud. Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You are not committed to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. Justice, mercy, humbleness are the ways that not only help us to welcome tomorrow, but help us to love ourselves and one another within it, so that there may be more tomorrows to welcome us. So be it, and amen.
Now it's time for our closing hymn, There is More Love Somewhere, number 95 in the Gray Hymnal. As I extinguish the chalice, let us join together in our benediction. Go in peace, go making peace, live gently, love mightily, and bow to the mystery.